Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on the Daily Debate. I'd like to welcome once again my guest in the studio, His Excellency Ambassador Shamel Naser, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you once again. As you've seen in the report, this is the second round of the reconciliation talks between the Palestinian factions here in Cairo. And if we look back into history, it's not the first time that Egypt is mediating between the different Palestinian factions. But let me start by asking you what's different about this time and this round in terms of the Egyptian mediation between the Palestinian factions.
Well, this is a positive and a very important development. It is, in a way, this is a continuation of Egypt's historic role vis-à-vis the Palestinian question. Egypt has always played a major role since the inception of the conflict, the Palestinian-Israeli or the Arab-Israeli conflict in 1948. And it has always been one of the, if not the top priority for our diplomacy and our foreign affairs. The issue of Palestine in different ways. And now things are changing. The world is changing, and it changes very fast at such a pace that many things are changing around us. We have seen some important developments in the regional scenery, in the political atmosphere, but the core of the problem remains the same. There is Palestinian people who are being denied their inalienable rights to self-determination, and now probably this is the sole case, the sole people in the world who has not acceded to self-determination and who has not enjoyed this basic human right, in my views. So Egypt was always in the forefront, playing this positive role, supporting Palestinian people, and also supporting stability in the region. Meaning we are trying to achieve this noble goal, which is the establishment of a Palestinian state within the borders of the 4th of June 1967, with Eastern Jerusalem as its capital. And we are doing this taking into account the developments around us. So one of the basic hurdles before unfortunately, the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations came to a settlement, and there is not much progress. There isn't any progress actually for quite a while. Some people think that this is basically should be attributed to the presence of the far-right parties in the Israeli government, and they are taking positions that are not really very conducive to any to work out any compromise or any sustainable understanding. But on the other hand, the Israelis have always maintained that one of the main hurdles is that the Palestinians do not speak in one voice.
Yes.
They don't have united stand on this basic issues,
yes,
which concern their future. So by now what we are trying to do by Egypt in different ways, including hosting this reconciliation meetings between different factions, Palestinian factions, some 15 Palestinian factions were present, were attending this meeting, is to make it possible for the Palestinian to speak in a unified way, to have some kind of a legal representation who can carry out this important mission to negotiate with the Israelis and to stand for their rights. So this reconciliation talks should be a prelude to some Palestinian elections, because we know that since 2006 there hasn't been any elections in Palestine because of the, unfortunately, because of this state of division and problems between Hamas on one side and the Palestinian Authority on the other side. And the Israelis do use this argument always, saying that you want us to speak to the Palestinians, but there are so many of them, there are so many voices. No one can claim to be speaking on behalf of the Palestinian people.
Yes.
So this is what we are trying to achieve, to unify the Palestinian front.
Now, you've mentioned a lot of important points during your conversation, and I'd like to stop at each part of them, if you'd allow me. You said at the beginning, Your Excellency, that the world has changed, and that's true indeed. The world has changed during the past 10 years. The region is very different, and new generations have come up. Yet, of course, the Palestinian cause will always remain the Arab soul dream to come true. And as you've correctly said, there's no way that any peace process will be able to go into progress between the Israelis and Palestinians unless the Palestinian factions are working in together. The question is here today, and maybe today let's try to sort of expand beyond the horizons of the ordinary questions and the ordinary way that we address the Palestinian situation by asking, what is hindering the Palestinian factions? Shouldn't they be having the same common goal as all the Palestinians by having an independent state? So where is the misunderstanding or miscommunication or different agendas and opinions in having an independent state? Where is the problem between the Palestinian factions?
Division itself is the problem. It has many reasons why we reached this stage. I mean, since Hamas came to power in 2006, it became impossible for any Palestinian authority, the National Palestinian Authority, to organize elections, fair and democratic elections in both Gaza Strip and the Western Bank. And so if it is physically impossible because there is this separation, they cannot, you cannot really organize any elections under these circumstances. And as long as it stays like this, it would be almost impossible for them for any faction to claim to be speaking on behalf of the people of Palestine.
Yes, well, the people of Palestine also are not only represented in the 1.5 million people in Gaza, which I'm sure that when you really want to talk about the citizens' levels, they have a different opinion when it comes to the reconciliation process. The question is here, now the elections are coming up, and that's what Egypt is trying to do, to try to put these factions together to put these elections ongoing. A lot of questions are raising on, well, what is going to be possibly the nominees who are going to be representing, whether they're the Palestinian National Authority or Hamas, or whether Hamas is going to still exist in this upcoming elections in a very prominent political position. What is your personal analysis to this? How will this be able to be reconciled? Are we going to be seeing new faces? Are there certain names that possibly have not been covered by the media for some time that might start to reappear again in the upcoming few weeks?
I think it's very difficult at this stage for anyone to tell how much of political support does every party enjoys within the population of Palestine, because the population of Palestine is divided into three main components. We have part of the population in Gaza Strip, and the other part in Western Bank, but there is also a large number of Palestinians, immigrants all over the world, and it's very difficult to assess or to make some kind of estimation for how much of a power base does every party enjoys. And hopefully only this election could tell us something about the main views of the Palestinian public. But no matter who comes to power after these elections, it will always be a plus to have a unified, legally accepted results. So whoever comes will enjoy definitely the support of the legality of being the representative of the Palestinian.
Now, the reason why I asked you that is because 2 years ago, and maybe COVID took us a little bit far away from that, but more than 2 years ago, there were specific names. Maybe we don't want to call out names right now because nobody is going to expect anything. But there were specific names of two people that were supposed to be in the scene, and then they disappeared. So what I'm trying to say here is that, as you said, because there's this division of they don't want to choose people that would be loyal or into a certain faction over others, so definitely they're going to be independent people that, you know, they don't belong to any certain factions. Not only that, but the Palestinian citizens by nature, and I know very well the Palestinian citizens' nature, they would always want to go for a role model that would represent their freedom and would represent their call for a nation. And from here, let's talk about what kind of guarantees can Israel give in terms of reconciling these factions with regard to releasing prisoners in the Israeli jails? Prominent names that people are calling for.
Well, calling for to release the prisoners has always been on the table. I mean, this is just a basic demand and legitimate demand, but it is not related to the unification process or efforts between the Palestinian factions, because this is something on which there is almost a consensus among all Palestinian factions. They agree that Israel should do more in terms of reviewing and hopefully releasing those prisoners, those Palestinian prisoners, no matter what is their ideological background or a party affiliation.
Yes, the reason why I asked you that also, Your Excellency, is because I wanted to know from you how far is Israel involved in a decision-making to agree or accept or approve the candidates that will be announced very soon for the Palestinian elections?
I think this is something up to the Palestinians to decide. Israel is an occupying power.
I mean, since they're going to be negotiating with these new faces, that's why I asked.
I think this is up to the Palestinian people to make. This is a choice they have to make to find out who's best to represent, who is going to represent their demand in a more effective way, including the ability to deal with the occupying power. And so this is not up to the Israelis to decide who's going to be elected. It's up to the Palestinians themselves to choose. And I'm sure they will choose wisely.
Now, let's also talk more about, I mean, not just the Egyptian efforts, but we do know that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, through the Arab League, had initiated the Arab Peace Initiative, which was stalemated for a long time. But today, what kind of common grounds do specifically Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates have towards the Palestinian elections as a gateway to resolving or a first step towards reviving, rather, the Arab Peace Initiative?
I think the principle of land for peace is still on the table. I mean, the Israelis are trying to say that it is peace for peace, but I don't agree. I think that as long as there is occupied land, there is people under occupation, there will always be a problem. At least we will not have normal relations in the region, and this would be an element of conflict. And so when you talked about the Arab Initiative, the principle behind it, which is give back the land you are occupying illegally for us to have a normal and peaceful relation is still on the table. I think the principle doesn't
change.
Doesn't change.
From your perspective, I mean, when you reflect back on what's happening and your expectations of what could happen in the near future, as the elections are just less than 2 months away, how far is it going to include President Mahmoud Abbas in the new elections?
It's very difficult for me to tell. Again, I have to say that this is up to the Palestinian people, a choice they have to make themselves.
All right, that's a very clever diplomatic answer, of course, coming from Ambassador, because this is a very crucial topic, and there's so much speculations of it, and we'll be seeing in the next few weeks what's going to happen, definitely, and the names that will be circulating on who possibly could be the candidates for whether Hamas is going to exist or not, or Abbas is going to continue or not. We will be returning back to the second part that we're going to be talking about, and a part of Egypt's efforts to maintain stability is also in the Libyan crisis, and we've seen tremendous efforts being done in this regard, despite interference by foreign countries, and despite, well, if we would want to call them terrorists, if we may say, but despite all that, the Libyan crisis is being resolved, and we're definitely towards the positive track. We'll talk about that with our guest in the studio right after this report. Please stay tuned.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi affirmed Egypt's full support to the Libyan government under Dbeibeh and voiced Egypt's readiness to introduce the Egyptian experience in the fields that would help achieve political stability in Libya. This came during his phone call to Abdelhamid al-Dbeibeh, the head of the new Libyan government of national unity. El-Sisi also stressed his confidence in Dbeibeh's ability to manage the current transitional period, achieve comprehensive reconciliation among Libyans, and unify the state institutions in preparation for holding national elections in December. The president congratulated Dbeibeh as his government obtained the Libyan parliament's confidence, saying this step represents a prominent historic step on the way of settling the Libyan crisis. Dbeibeh, for his part, expressed thanks to President al-Sisi and appreciation for Egypt's sincere role and tireless efforts to settle the Libyan crisis. He underscored the special brotherly relations between both countries and the historic ties gathering their peoples. Libya's Prime Minister expressed keenness to continue boosting cooperation, consultation and intensive coordination with Egypt. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi also held a phone call with the new head of the Libyan Presidential Council, Mohammed al-Manfi, during which he urged maintaining Libyan dialogue to curb foreign interference. Presidential spokesman Bassem Radi said that President al-Sisi congratulated Menfi on the formation of a new executive authority in Libya, as the new government under Libyan Prime Minister Abdelhamid Dbeibeh obtained Parliament's confidence. He urged building on these positive steps and advancing the path of political settlement in the neighboring country. For his part, Menfi praised Egypt's sincere efforts seeking to restore security and stability in his country and to achieve development in light of the historic ties linking both nations.
Welcome back again. You're still watching us on the Daily Debate. I'm still delighted to have joining me in the studio His Excellency Ambassador Shamel Naser, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you again for the third time. Now, let's move to a different perspective, and let's shift to the African continent and the Egyptian pivotal role in this regard. And specifically, we're talking here about the Libyan crisis that was going through a critical phase, increased its complexity. It also carried very serious security repercussions that extended beyond the Libyan borders. And at some point, it was on the brink of explosion, if I may say. But the Egyptian leadership and the Egyptian intelligence have played a very brilliant role in maintaining the situation and bringing these Libyan parties together. Let's talk about how do you view and assess the decisive and crucial steps Egypt took in this regard? As we've seen a new government or representing a new parliament today, we're talking about al-Dbeibeh, and tell me, how do you view that?
Well, Libya is a very important country, a neighbor. Suffice to look at the map to see that our western borders with Libya, they are for several hundreds of kilometers. And there are also, we have many things in common. We have links between the people of Libya and the people of Egypt. And for so many reasons, I mean, it's so obvious that Libya is important to us. What happens in our next door neighbor is very important to us. And in general, we would like to see stability and prosperity. I mean, even at the individual level, I mean, our own level as individuals, I think it would be much more reassuring to have a prosperous neighbor than to have chaos and fire in your next door neighbor house. And so this is exactly how we perceive things. We have been trying very hard to help bring back stability to Libya. Libya went through very difficult phase and witnessed some major upheaval since 2011, and it was our I mean, it was very important for us to see that life in Libya goes back to normal, and at the same time we could not allow Libya to be a haven for any kind of terrorists or any kind of threat to our national security. We cannot accept this. Our president, the President Sisi, made it very clear that we will not allow this to happen for any threat to our western borders. And so we have been trying throughout these years, and I can see now that we came to this point where we can see some important and positive changes in the scene, and I think that this is very important, that a government of unity, of national unity, has assumed office in Tripoli with head of the Presidential Council and the head of the government, and the government was endorsed by the Parliament. The Parliament. I mean, this is a
huge step
forward, and I think this sets the scene for further unification of all of the country's institutions, and most important, for the elimination of any foreign presence.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. Pardon me for interrupting there, because that's exactly what I was going to ask you. Now that we see, by the way, President Sisi has also congratulated or expressed his sincere congratulations to Al-Dabeiba on Saturday over a phone call for gaining the confidence of the Libyan parliament. So Al-Dabeiba's government now is actually opening up a new era on the Libyan political scene, and with the presence of the foreign mercenaries in Libya, how's that going to be able to sort of take a crucial step towards eliminating, kicking them completely out? Will they still need Egypt's help for that, or are they safe alone to now be able to handle the situation?
I think now they are working. They have two major tasks. First, to unify the country, and then I mean, they are interrelated, the two issues, and to get rid of all the foreign mercenaries or whatever, or any troops in Libya, because this will undermine definitely the unification process and cannot be accepted by Egypt or by anyone who wants to see stability in Libya. So they will be working, I presume, on these two tasks in parallel, two tracks: unification of the of their army, unification of different institutions, and to prepare. I mean, this national unity government is supposed to be paving the way for general elections. Very soon, they should held in next December. They should organize elections, and so this will be probably the basic task before this government, and we wish them success.
Yes. Now, when we decided to discuss today Egypt's pivotal role, we not only have been focused on the Middle East region, which of course the core of it is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, but also Africa, and the core of it was Libya, but Libya is only part of the African continent, and we belong together to the same continent. Not only do we have borders together, so more than 1,200 kilometers of border lines, so it's only natural that Egypt would be keen to resolve crises in the African continent. From here, I want to ask you on a general perspective, the Egyptian role in the African continent, its key steps and commitment towards the African continent on all levels since President Sisi took office up until this moment. How would you evaluate that?
Well, Egypt is a major player in Africa. I mean, we are African by our geography, by our history, and we have such important ties with Africa in general. I mean, suffice it to mention the Nile water issue. This is just one link with Africa among so many others. There is more to Africa than the water, and we have always been in playing a very active and important role since 1963, when former President Gamal Abdel Nasser attended and joined the African leaders in establishing what was at the time the Organization of African Unity, which later on
is African Union today.
Yes, which became now the African Union. So this is our it's a continuation of our historical role in Africa. We have supported all of the all African liberation movements. They always got support from Egypt at different stage of their struggle. And now the challenges before Africa are changing. But Egypt is still playing this leading role. We are one of the main contributors to the African Union budget. We provide help whenever we can, technical help to our African partners and friends and brothers. And so this is very, very important, and it will go on. And this is also, it is very important to notice that Africa is a young continent. Meaning, of course, the continent is a very old continent, but it has a young population. And this young population is a growing market. Growing market with, you can witness the not only population growth, but there is also an improvement in the standards of living, which makes it an always expanding market. So for Egypt, it could play a very important role in providing us with some of our basic needs and commodities, like we are getting tea from Kenya, like you can get beef from Sudan, and so on. And at the same time, it is a fertile land where we can export
agricultural products.
Exactly, and there is a lot can be done in terms of the improvement of the investment environment. The role of the government is to provide a conducive environment, and this we have. Egypt has excellent relations now with almost every African country. We don't have probably problems with maybe one exception or two. But in spite of, having said this, once the government has provided an excellent diplomatic atmosphere and environment. It will be up to the business community to do their share by increasing the investments, by having more trade, because this means that this excellent political relations will always be there because of the common interests on both sides to develop and to continue this positive trend. So I see it as a very important area for Egypt foreign policy. This is our domain. It has always been, but of late we see a more proactive diplomacy. And the presence of the or the participation of our president in different summits is also very important, because at this level the interaction between the leaders at the highest level makes it possible for them to reach decisions, important decisions about the future of our relations and for further cooperation.
Yes, maybe on top of the challenges that maybe the world wasn't expecting it to be an issue is the COVID-19, and we'll also talk more about the Egyptian experience and how that could be also shared to the rest of the African continent, whether it's in terms of the medical protocols, medical equipments, or even shared vaccines, because Africa does have the right to have its share in the vaccines that the rest of the developed world are urging to buy.
Well, Egypt has always tried to share our experience in the field of medicine with Africa. But as far as the COVID is concerned, everything is new to everybody, including to us. I mean, we are all learning by the day about COVID and about the new vaccines, and so definitely we need to know more about the pandemic and to do more about it. But as a matter of principle, sharing our knowledge in the medical field has always been there. We sent experts to different African countries, and we will continue to do so.
Yes, I just have time for one more question, 2 minutes. And Egypt has always been very wise in dealing with situations, but definitely today Egypt speaks at a much more different level. And if we want to talk about the diplomatic relations that Egypt has maintained with every single country around the world, everybody listens to Egypt now. Everybody has weight for Egypt in their decision making, or when it comes to discussing any matter, regardless of what elections happens, who president comes and who leaves. Dealing with Egypt is at a much more different level today. If we want to talk about the challenges that could be facing Egypt in the upcoming future, generally speaking, even if it's in light of the COVID-19, for instance, do you have any kind of perspective that you'd like to share?
Well, this is a very wide area, a very wide. I mean, talking about COVID is a separate issue. This we are all. I mean, the whole world is still in the learning process. It is still learning about it, more about it, and we are the humanity in general. I mean, nobody will be safe until the population of the globe, of everybody is safe, because it spreads at very high speed, and so it doesn't make sense like to think any nation could not think of itself as being like in isolation in this world we live in.
Global village.
Yes, it's just a global village, and I mean, they found the COVID infection reached as far as New Zealand. I mean, So nobody is immune until everybody is immune. So this is as far as the COVID is concerned. As far as the challenges facing Egypt in particular, I think we have to, and going back to Africa again, we have to work towards further economic integration. And for this, we need to, of course, at the level of the continent, we have to invest a lot in the infrastructure. I mean, in order to have commerce, in order to have trade and investments
in Africa,
you have to have more seaports, you have to have more airports, you have to facilitate the procedure for this trade. I think this could make a difference because we have the political will. There is a political will. I mean, everywhere you look around in Africa, they are working towards more cooperation. So what you need is, of course, a legal framework, which is provided by international treaties, and this we are working on it, and we have achieved a lot in this regard. We have a free trade agreement, which is very important, and you have to, on the physical side, on the ground, you have to provide for this trade to grow by providing a better infrastructure.
Absolutely. Ambassador Shamel Naser, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you very much for joining us, Your Excellency, on the Daily Debate. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of our episode of the Daily Debate this evening. I'm Yasmin Bakir signing off. Thank you for watching.